Can you guys see? So I have next to me a box that held the 2025 Hot Wheels factory set. And the factory set contains 447 cars, which is every single basic car, like this one that was released last year. It cost me $700, and I bought it second week of March, and I sold the box last week at a diecast show, and I made about $220. Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to my channel, and I am a diecast collector. What inspired this video was my experience of selling this factory set at diecast show a week ago, plus this tweet that I saw where someone talked about how they re-entered, I guess, the Pokemon cards hobby. And they were explaining how things kind of got out of hand, how they were spending a lot of money they didn't have, racking up credit card bills to constantly try to keep up and buy new sets of Pokemon cards. I thought that would make for an interesting video to talk about how people get into hobbies and how some people get a little bit out of control. I think everyone gets back into hobbies innocently enough. This is a Hot Wheels Basic. It costs about $1.25. You can find them all over. Target, Walmart, grocery stores, even pharmacies will have these. For me personally, I think I re-entered the hobby in 2023. I was visiting a friend and they were showing me their collection because they had just gotten into this hobby. And I got excited, so I started buying cars. I started buying basic ones like this, and then eventually I would move up to more expensive ones, which I will show you later in the video. But I think the motivation for this first phase is what I would call the discovery phase. The discovery phase of a hobby is fueled by novelty and excitement. It's a new hobby and there's lots of novelty involved in collecting things. And there's a genuine excitement because I think these hobbies reconnect us to our childhoods. For the most part, whether your hobby is die-cast cars, action figures, Legos, or Pokemon cards, it is always some sort of connection to a toy or activity that you enjoyed as a child. I think the second phase of people's hobby journey is what I would call going deeper. And that is reflective in two things. The first is you become more active in the culture or the community. So you might join Facebook groups or Discord groups. You might follow certain websites or social media accounts that will talk about upcoming releases. And along with that, you will start buying more expensive stuff. So this is what's known as a Hot Wheels Premium. This retails for about $7 before tax. And there are people who get really serious about it, and you might be like me and end up going to events. So this is a mini GT car. It retailed for around $60 once you do the conversion. I purchased this car at the Indonesian Modification Expo last year over the summer. I actually flew to Jakarta, and there's another video I'll link to. But while I was in Thailand, I figured I was really close, so why don't I go to this event? And this car is signed by Kaito-san, who is actually one of the founders of Liberty Walk, a car tuner, and they in real life you can actually, buy a Lamborghini and have them like outfitted and wrap it to look just like this car. But I think the second phase where people go deeper usually has one event triggers them to go into the third stage. The third stage is what I call buy everything. And what usually triggers people to go from the second stage where they start buying some stuff and more stuff that they might be interested in to the third stage of buy everything to the point where they might be racking up credit card debt and spending money they don't have in order to keep chasing new stuff is that at some point along the way, there will be an item that you missed out on and then you watched it blow up in pricing on the secondary market. And this sort of fear of missing out on something in the future is what drives people from that second stage of going deeper into a hobby into the third stage of just buying everything. And this fear of missing out of cool stuff manifests, I think, in two different ways. The first is you start buying stuff that you're sort of excited about, but you don't want to regret not having it. And then where the buy everything phase really takes off and gets out of control is you just start buying everything because you feel like everything could potentially go up in price and you could potentially make money on stuff. So you start seeing these items less as things that you are personally interested in and want to collect, and more so as potential investments and commodities. Now, to be clear, not everyone who enters a hobby makes it into the buy everything stage, but a lot of people certainly do. And for me personally, I never went into debt to buy anything that I have in my collection. And my collection is sizable. I can show you some clips of the various shelving that I have dedicated to holding all of my Hot Wheels and diecast collection, most of which I bought because I thought they would eventually appreciate in value and that I'd be able to make some money on it. But eventually, everyone enters what I call the fourth stage, which is the exit or trying to sell off most of your collection. This is one of the boxes of stuff that I brought to the diecast show last week to try and sell. And as you can see, it's full of stuff, so I didn't succeed at selling this. To be clear, I think the exit stage is pretty much inevitable. I think most people eventually have their interests change or their life circumstances change and they feel like they just have to start selling off stuff. So whether that's you getting married or having kids and now your apartment like mine is full of various toys, and well, it's probably helpful to sell off some of those when you have something like a baby on the way. Or the other circumstance is someone manages to hold on to their collection over their lifetime, and then as they near the end of their life, as they get older, they realize that they should probably put some steps towards selling off their collection so that their spouse or their children doesn't have to deal with it once they're gone. And of course, there are examples where people just pass and they leave off their entire collection of stuff like, I don't know, stamps, coins, model train collection, whatever it is, for someone else to handle and sell off after they're gone. But this last stage of exit, the one that I'm in now, trying to sell off most of my collection, I think it is here that you realize, well, at least I realized two things. The first is that it is really hard to sell stuff. It is much easier to buy stuff than it is to sell stuff and find someone who wants your stuff, especially if your goal is to try to make a profit. But even like that notwithstanding, even if your goal is just to sell off stuff for what you paid for it, you are going to find that it is really hard to find other collectors out there who want your stuff. That's what I learned at the diecast show because I was there for 8 hours and I think I sold a total of like 6 things. And besides this giant factory set, the rest of the stuff I sold off, I think I probably made in the neighborhood of like $5 to $10 on each of them. Which brings me to my second point. The effort and the money that you expend to accumulate a collection of stuff hoping that it goes up in value to later sell it is almost never worth it. One example I can give is I have a friend who opened up his own store and he sells all kinds of things: diecast cars, video games, Pokemon cards, action figures. And for a lot of his adult life, he was accumulating a lot of this stuff, and he accumulated so much of what was mostly video games over time that eventually he had to resort to renting a storage unit to keep all of this. And this is not an uncommon story. I have another friend who was a diecast collector, and he was the same way. He accumulated so much stuff that he also had to get a storage unit to put all this stuff in. And I remember being at his store and he was going through all of the stuff that he pulled out of storage and now that he can, try to sell off in his store. And he was looking up the value of what he paid for it and what the stuff is worth now. And I'll give an example. There might have been a video game that was originally like $10 that he paid for, and now it might be worth $30. And you might think, wow, that's a pretty good business. If I can just buy some stuff, hold on to it for 5 to 10 years, and then sell it off, I can eventually double or triple my money. But here's the problem with that. One, you have to eventually rent a storage unit to put all of this stuff into, and that runs in the neighborhood of generally at least $200 to $300 a month. And that is going to eat into your profits. So yes, it's great. He managed to sell a game that he originally paid $10 for, and someone might give him $30 for it now. But over time, he had to accumulate storage fees in order to get this game or whatever the item is to 2026 in order to sell it. So in reality, if you're doing the math, I'm not sure how much money you're actually making when you have to pay for storage. The second thing I would stress is that if you had the choice of taking, say, $100 and buying diecast toys, and then taking that same $100 and just investing it into the stock market, you are probably always better off just investing it into the stock market. Like if you do the math, putting $100 into the stock market 10 years ago, it's now probably worth at least, I don't know, $150. I should actually do the math on that. One second. So I did pull up an S&P 500 calculator just to do the math, and if you had invested $100 into the S&P 500, if you had put $100 into the market 10 years ago, it would now be worth about $330. So yes, you can buy a whole bunch of video games or die-cast cars and hope that they will eventually turn from $10 to $30 in 10 years, or you can skip all of that, skip the headache of finding a place to put all this stuff, skip the headache of trying to sell this stuff, and just put your money into the stock market. You would probably get a similar return on your money. But people never really think about that, because what starts as something really exciting and, a hobby that you enjoy eventually gets fueled by missing out on something and turns into something else entirely that just kind of gets away from you. And it gets to the point where you're buying all sorts of stuff that you may or may not even want for yourself. I'm here to tell you the reality is, don't bother doing that. It is really hard to sell off stuff. It is way harder to sell off stuff than it is to buy stuff. If you're simply looking to make money, just put your money into the stock market. Don't look at it. And I promise you, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, however long, you are probably going to end up doing just as well, if not better, than trying to turn a hobby into a sort of side hustle or investment. That's all I've got for you in this video. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. And as always, take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too.